He said, son, you've only got to remember two things. Don't volunteer for anything and do what the sergeants tell you.
Welcome to this episode of The Veterans Next Door. In this episode, we are featuring Mike Thornton, retired U.S. Army colonel with 37 years of service. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Ed. Glad to be here.
So, Mike, would you share with us a little bit about your growing up? And I understand you joined the Army when you were 17 years old.
That was my birthday present to myself. I grew up in Rome, Georgia, but was just born there. My dad was a World War II veteran, infantry, World War II. But after the war, he joined the Air Force. So he was a career Air Force sergeant, worked in aircraft maintenance. So we traveled all over the country. And at one point, he got assigned to Okinawa. So as we were going over there, we landed on a little island called Wake Island. I even liked history as a little boy. There's some interesting things that happened there, World War II history. We refueled and we went on to Okinawa. And that was a really interesting place to live for several years.
You ended up in the service at 17 years of age?
Yes, I went and talked to the Army recruiter when I was like 16 and a half, did all the tests, waited till the day I was 17, and then my dad drove me to the recruiting office in Atlanta. Everything was fine till I got there about 5 in the morning, and he said, well, okay, see you, son, and my hand wouldn't move. I couldn't open the door. All of a sudden he said, what's wrong? I said, Dad, I'm a little scared, they're probably this is going to be tough. I've never done this before. He said, son, you've only got to remember two things. Don't volunteer for anything and do what the sergeants tell you. Turned out to be pretty good advice.
Excellent advice. So where did you go to boot camp?
So it was Fort Benning, Georgia. It was about 3 months, I guess, basic combat training there. I told a story about, getting off the bus and they're making us crawl underneath these barracks back and forth, and I bumped my head and blood was going everywhere. It wasn't a bad cut, but it just bled a lot. And the sergeant's like, come here, son, what are you doing under there? You're all bleeding. I was like, you told me to be here, drill sergeant. Kind of reminds you of the Forrest Gump story, you told me to crawl under there. He said, no, come over here, son, sit down. So they stopped the bleeding, and it wasn't too bad of an experience. I mean, they definitely get your attention, as you well know from your boot camp experience.
Oh, yes.
You just got to do what they tell you.
So what was your specialty then in the Army?
I was interested in flying, and I was seeing a lot of helicopters on TV. So I told the recruiter I want to fly, and he said, yes, we'll guarantee it. So before I went in, I'm telling my cousin, I'm going to fly. And he says, well, great, are you going to be a pilot or what? I'm like, I don't know. He just said I was going to fly. So I go back to the recruiter, and the recruiter's like, no, we're going to make you like a crew chief. We're going to make you a mechanic, and you can be a crew chief. So that's what I did when I ended up getting to my unit. And there was a group of guys that liked working on helicopters, and I just kind of fell in with those guys. So what I would do a lot of times on the weekend, I would just go out and get my toolbox and do some things in the hangar and work on helicopters. And I guess people notice that, so pretty soon they asked me, did I want to be a crew chief, which means you get your own helicopter. And I was excited about that. Put your name on the book, or your name's on the side of the helicopter. We flew every day. We did a lot of training. There was always maneuvers. The East German Czech border was there. You might recall that a lot of people know about the Berlin Wall, but all of East Germany was divided, and we had a lot of Soviet troops, like 40 divisions on the other side. So every day we would fly the border, and there'd be these East German border guards, and sometimes people would try to come across, and they'd just machine gun them. I mean, it was pretty surreal for a young man to see that. It's kind of scary. Hof was one of our border camps, and I ended up going up there quite a bit and learning the border, and then I would maintain the helicopter in the evening and do maintenance and stuff, and I pretty much flew every time it flew.
So did you like being a crew chief?
Ed, I really did. At this point in time, Sergeant Fostick, our maintenance sergeant, pulled me out of the maintenance platoon and said, we got some brand new Cobras coming to our unit. There are 10 brand new Cobras, and I want you to be one of the Cobra crew chiefs. Well, I was really honored. I mean, he was kind of just recognizing me, I guess, for doing a good job in the maintenance platoon. And you get your name on the logbook, your name's on the side of the helicopter, and they were brand new Cobras out of the factory. It was a tremendous benefit. In fact, I still remember the number. It was 16427, made in 1970. We got 10 Cobras, and that was mine, 16427. So, I loved being a crew chief. We were short of pilots, so I got to fly in the front seat a lot. We did a lot of training, also thinking we may have to fight the Soviets on the border. That one day the Soviets may come across into NATO country, and we'd have to fight them. One time the Secretary of Defense came, and there was a lot of generals there. So we had prepared for this event because it was a big deal. And we went up that morning where we would land, I would get out, we would load rockets, refuel, and I would check and make sure everything's okay. I'd jump back in the front seat. We would climb up, we would climb up and then dive in on these tanks and shoot our rockets. And I'm up front, so I'm shooting the minigun and the 40 millimeter, and we'd break off and go refuel again. We took a lunch break, and after lunch, we'd refuel the helicopter again. We're ready to go, and the pilot said, "Hey, Thornton, I want this weather officer to go flying. He's not a pilot. He's an Air Force weather officer. He's been wanting to fly. I want to let him go fly. Is that fine?" And I thought, why is he asking my permission? And I said, sure. And he's like, good. We're going to put him up front. And I'm like, oh, in my helicopter. He's getting in my helicopter. Oh, okay. So I help the guy brief him up. I get him in. I fasten his seatbelt, show him how to talk on the intercom, and I put my helmet on him. It's one that I had a little Roadrunner painted on the back. It said beep, beep. So I put my personal flight helmet on him, show him how to wear it, wave goodbye, and they take off. And, I'm standing there watching, and these guys are climbing up, and they go around, and they're getting ready to engage the target, and man, the rotor system comes off or something, and the helicopter crashes. It had just refueled. It had rockets on it, ammunition. So we all go over there. We had a guy in a Jeep, and he picked me up, and we ran over there as quick as we could, but it was a huge fire. It was so bad. And Ed, I just felt terrible because I thought, well, this is my helicopter. I've been doing all the maintenance on it. And I thought maybe I did something, to cause this. I mean, I was just devastated. Besides the loss of life of the pilot and this poor lieutenant Air Force weather officer, it was devastating. Within a short period of time, the Army sends an investigation team to look at this. And one of the team members, and Sergeant Fostick, my platoon, I have another platoon sergeant by now, I forget the other guy's name. They called me in the back room and they said, look, this isn't your fault. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, it's not maintenance related. We think this is pilot related, but don't tell anybody that. We're not through with the investigation, but it's not something that you did. It's not some mechanical fault or something you did in maintaining the aircraft.
Mike, you were lucky not to be on that aircraft. So how long were you there?
Well, it was a 3-year tour. And so toward the end, I said, hey, I kind of like the Army. These guys are treating me good. I think I want to go to flight school. So I went and took a flight physical, and I wore glasses, and they said, you wear glasses, you can't go. But anyway, my 3 years is up, and so it's time to go home, and I decided to go home and go to college and use a GI Bill.
So where did you go to college then?
A little college in Rome, Georgia called Berry College. Great campus, kind of a family connection. My grandmother used to own a bunch of land around there.
Well, it's interesting when, servicemen are first discharged from the service, they are lost, not knowing for sure what they were going to do. Did you have a plan coming out of at that time to go back into the service and become a pilot?
That's a great question, and you're exactly right. For a while, I just felt like I wasn't adjusted properly. I just couldn't adjust as a civilian, and I really missed the Army. So yeah, and I thought often about wanting to be a pilot, but I just said, well, I guess I wear glasses, and I guess I can't. So after a short period of time, I said, well, I'm going to get my degree, and then I'm going to apply to go to OCS, and I'm just going to be an Army officer, and I'll do something else. I'll just pick another career choice. Since I can't be a pilot, I'll just pick something else to do.
During this period of time while you were in college, did you get married?
Actually before, yeah. Debbie and I got married in 1976.
Where did they send you when you came back into the service?
Well, I finally got a class for OCS. It took a while because, this is the mid-70s. It really has drawn down from Vietnam. We had plenty of officers. The Army was getting smaller, so it was really hard to get in OCS. It took a year or so to get in, but I went to OCS at Fort Benning, Georgia. And then afterwards, I went to the Armor Basic Course to be a tank second lieutenant. And so the way this works is you have to learn how to drive the tank, shoot the big gun, be a loader, be the tank commander. And I felt kind of intimidated because these guys were really smart. And in OCS, I was just wanting to graduate and be a lieutenant. But now I realize it's real important your class standing. I just, for whatever reason, I started studying, and it's a lot about Soviet tactics and how tank works and tank maintenance. And I really felt I was the underdog because I'd been to this small college in Georgia, and these guys had all been to military colleges. But I studied hard. My wife helped me. She watched our daughter and made sure I had plenty of time to study. At the end of the thing, it's kind of amazing. The company commander calls me in, and I thought I was in trouble. And he said, well, congratulations, you're the honor graduate. You're the #1 guy in the class. And I'm like, well, great. What does that mean? And he's like, well, you call Armor Branch. You can go anywhere in the Army where you want to go. You have your choice of assignments because the #1 guy gets his choice of anywhere in the Army. And I didn't really know. We were going to Texas, and I thought that's fine. But So I called Armor Branch and I said, it's Mike Thornton. I'm the honor graduate of this officer basic course class. And he says, do you know anybody in your class that's got a flight physical? And I said, well, yeah, me. And he said, hold on, this major wants to talk to you. So now I think I'm in real trouble. So the major gets on the phone and he goes, you got a flight physical? And I said, yes, sir, I did that while I was in the basic course. And he said, well, we need people to go to flight school. So can you go next week?
So you're an officer basic course, and how did you end up with a flight physical?
Normally you wouldn't have. But first of all, you had to have 2 years of troop time to go to flight school. But one day I'm in the BX and I'm in line and I'm kind of looking at something over here and the sergeant got in front of me and I turned around and he said, oh, I'm sorry, Lieutenant, I didn't know you were in line. I'm like, no, I was just browsing. I said, go ahead in front of me. And he said, well, hey, you got those wings on your uniform. Are you a pilot? And I said, no, I used to be a crew chief. I said, I'd like to be a pilot, but I wear glasses. I can't go to flight school. And he says, oh, you can't be a warrant officer. You could be a commissioned officer and go to flight school. And I said, no, Sergeant, that's not right. And he said, sir, I'm the NCOIC of the Flight Surgeon Clinic. I give flight physicals every day for a living. I'm a medic, and that's what I do. He said, now that you're commissioned, you can get a flight physical and you can wear glasses because you're a commissioned officer. I'm like, oh, you're kidding me. And he said, no, come over next Thursday and I'll give you a flight physical. So just because I was nice to this guy in the BX, I go home and tell my wife, guess what? This sergeant, I was nice to him in line. He tells me come get a flight physical. And she's like, that's good, dear.
So where was flight school held?
Fort Rucker, Alabama. The same place I had gone to learn how to be a mechanic in 1968, learn how to be a helicopter mechanic and a crew chief. It's the exact same place. And it was a pretty interesting experience. It's intense. You go to class about 3 hours a day in the classroom, and then you're flying at the flight line about 4 hours a day, every day. So the Army does a really good job of teaching you basic helicopter operations. And then you do, after that, you do some basic tactics. You do instrument flying, night flying. We even flew with night vision goggles. And then at the end, the top part of the class gets selected to be Air Scouts. So I went to the Air Scout part, which was really interesting. I got to call field artillery, work with attack helicopters, Air Force A-10s, that kind of stuff.
So where were you stationed, or where did you go to next then as a scout pilot?
Well, as a scout pilot, I went back. I actually wrote a letter. Now, I took the pressure off myself because I'm still studying, trying to be the #1 guy. And then I wrote a letter to our assignments officer, and I asked to go to the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment in Germany. And the guy answered me back, and he goes, okay, we need people there. I'd been there before. And he said, okay, you're locked in. That's where you're going.
So flight school is how long of a period of training?
That's about 9 months, 9 or 10 months.
So now you're back to Germany for the second time. How long did you spend on that tour?
Well, I was there 3 years, and I got signed off pretty quick on the border. As a second lieutenant, everybody was being really nice to me. I didn't really understand why, but these warrant officers were all coming in saying, hey, can you fly Saturday? Let's go fly Saturday. Let's go fly Sunday. So I'm flying every day the East German Czech border, which you kind of had to know from memorization. I mean, we had maps, but you still had to know where to check in, and if you saw someone on the border, how you reported it, maybe a Soviets or an East Germans, what they were doing. So there's kind of a lot to the whole scheme of maneuver. So the first year, I probably flew 7 days a week, almost all the time. And I ended up, at the first year, I had 1,000 hours of flight time. And when I found out later, the commander had told these warrant officers, get Thornton trained and then you can start out processing. So they were kind of ganging up on me. There was about 6 or 7 that wanted to out process and go home. So I got a lot of experience as a second lieutenant.
So you've completed 3 years in Germany now. What was your next assignment from there?
Well, the Army in its wisdom sent me to the Armor Officer Advanced course. And this is about a year, and it's studying tank warfare. Well, I go back and I do my best, but Ed, I'm thinking, I'm a helicopter pilot. I'm going to keep flying. But back then, Army didn't have an aviation branch. You were infantry or armor or whatever, but you still flew helicopters. So I spent a year studying armor wars because we studied armor warfare. Yep. But at that time we were thinking we would fight tanks with helicopters.
Did you lose your flight status during that period of time?
Normally you would if you're out of the cockpit for a year, but I think that was programmed in. I didn't fly, of course, during the year because you're just in the classroom studying every day.
So during your career, you're now a pilot and flying helicopters. What did you figure your future held?
I don't really know. I think I thought about making the Army a career a little bit in the back of my mind, but there were some points when I got scared. Like now I'm a junior captain. I go to Fort Rucker next, and I'm teaching people to fly. I'm teaching the Air Scout course. So I'm teaching guys to fly helicopters. And I knew some really good pilots that were great Army officers, and they were captains, and they didn't get promoted to major. And that really shocked me because I said, oh gosh, these guys are good. These are somebody I respect. But there was just a few year groups, it was like a 50% promotion rate to majors. So a lot of guys didn't get promoted.
Were you nearing 20 years of retirement by that time?
Oh, no, I'm just
okay.
a junior captain.
Okay.
But I am at Fort Rucker teaching people to fly. When I got there, a friend of mine said, don't sign in. Go out to the airfield to the Aero Scout course, and I want you to meet somebody. So he introduces me to this battalion commander. And he's like, hey, Thornton's the guy you want to teach the Aero Scout course because I've been in Germany flying Aero Scouts. So I said, great. So that's what I was going to do. But I still had to go sign in to base. And when I did, went to sign in on main post, the assignments guy says, oh, I want you to write manuals. And I'm like, no, I've already got a job flying. He's like, that's not going to be good for your career. And I kind of said, well, okay, I'll take the chance.
How many years of service do you have by this time?
8 or 9, I guess, maybe 9 or 10 years.
So now, Mike, you're a captain, and are you looking for a different opportunity within the Army?
Well, I think so. They were coming out with the aviation branch, and I really enjoyed my time as an armor helicopter pilot, but I just wasn't so sure about the aviation branch. So I looked around and I changed my branch to Medical Service Corps. So what that is I'm a medevac pilot, but we work for the Army Medical Department. Our doctors and nurses, they own the helicopters, they own the medical mission, and so we move over. We're still flying, but I was working for Medical Service Corps. Great opportunity, lots of good training. We were trying to carry on like the traditions that we had developed in Vietnam of getting, for example, our doctors and nurses, our healthcare close to our soldiers before a battle starts, so that they've got immediate medical care close to them. And of course also transporting our wounded on the battlefield. That's a whole big part of what we would do.
Because in looking at pictures of Vietnam and the individual helicopters going in to rescue downed pilots, did you have any of those kinds of experiences?
Well, yeah, now by the time I changed my branch to Medical Service Corps, Vietnam is over.
Yeah, I understand.
But yes, we trained all the time to be able to go pick up our soldiers. One of the big things we did was night vision goggle training, and now it's becoming a big thing. So we're flying a lot with goggles, and we've got to get our crew chief who's in the back. He operates usually the hoist, and our medic who would take care of our patients. Now, if we can land, we're going to land. But if we can't get in because of rough terrain, we're going to hover, and the crew chief's going to work the hoist, and our medic's going to go down, and they're wearing night vision goggles too, and take care of our patient, treat him, and then bring him up on the hoist. So there's a lot of training about how we're going to do that, in the next battle that we foresee having, and how we can capture the lessons learned from Vietnam.
So where was this training held at?
Well, all over. I was at Fort Sam, Houston, Texas, which is the home of our Army Medical Command. So there's a lot of things going on there. We're doing doctrine development. During this time frame also, Ed, there's all kind of exercises going on. And I'll give you one example. In El Paso, Texas, there's a big exercise where the desert north of there, White Sands, they just bring thousands of troops. So we provide medical support. We're training as medics, but we're also providing real-time helicopter support in case someone gets hurt. I'd like to tell you an interesting story about something my guys did when someone got hurt out there. So there was some Marines training, and a truck had rolled over, and it had killed one Marine and hurt another one pretty badly. Well, my guys, we had several areas where we're doing medevac support, little areas. And my guys, about the time this truck rolled over, are landing in a little place called Socorro, New Mexico. And it's just a little house and a few things. They're landing the helicopter, shutting down. Well, one of the Marines runs down the hill because they see the crossings on the helicopter. And they go, you got to help. Now, we're not doing medical support till like the next day. We're not supposed to be. But my guys knew it was an emergency. They wanted to help, but they're low on fuel. And they've just landed. So there's a little storage thing there with a truck in it. And my guys rip the lock off, get the door open, and somehow hot wire the truck to get it out to refuel the helicopter. One of the medics runs up the hill, and they're doing CPR on one of the Marines. They get the helicopter refueled. They get the Marines down the hill, put them in the helicopter, and fly them to an Air Force base at White Sands. The next day I go to visit them, and I could tell they're scared when I show up. And they think they're in big trouble for destroying this truck, and they destroyed the little garage it was in, totally destroyed it all, And I'm like, no, I was going to give you a medal. I don't care that you tore the stuff up. Thanks for taking care of the Marines. And many times in my career, I've worked with the Marines and sometimes the Navy team too. And these guys were so appreciative. But just for example, as we're going through this long time of peacetime activity, medevac is always there for our soldiers, and there's always things that civilians need help or soldiers need help, and we're there to support them.
You're XO of how many people at this time?
Well, it's a medical evacuation battalion, so we had several companies of air ambulance and several companies of ground ambulance, several hundred people, maybe 500-600 soldiers.
So you weren't flying much any longer?
A little bit. I mean, as the XO, I got to fly a little bit, but not too much. Later on, I get command of a medevac battalion. I get promoted to lieutenant colonel. I get command, and the Army in its wisdom sent me to the Black Hawk transition, which was kind of an interesting thing. The Black Hawk's coming in the Army inventory. I go to the Black Hawk transition, and then I came back to my unit. I never flew Black Hawks again. Because I'm getting too senior and I got some staff jobs. I just didn't fly much anymore after that.
How many hours of flight time have you logged over your career?
Well, I guess all total, probably about 3,800 in helicopters, in Army helicopters.
Which is a significant amount of hours.
It is. It's a lot of time,
Yeah.
Especially that first year when I got 1,000 hours in Germany as a second lieutenant. That was really tough. I mean, it was hard on me and the family. I enjoyed it because you're young and you're enthusiastic, and it's great to get that experience when you're young.
Have you neared retirement by this time? And have you thought about getting out of the service?
No, I mean, I get about 20 years. Now I'm a battalion commander. I've got about 20 years in. And I always thought when I got 20, I'm going to get out. But guess what? Now you know people and the jobs get interesting. So I decided to stay. We had a vice chief of staff of the Army that was an aviator. And he changed the way we were doing business. He took medevac out from under the hospitals and medical command, and he gave it to aviation because aviation was a fairly new branch. So I got sent back to Fort Rucker, keep going to Fort Rucker. But we also have some medevacs training there and for our medics, and there's things going on. So I get sent back to Fort Rucker, and my job is to take aviation battalion and brigade commanders and train them on medevac because it's kind of new for them. They understand the flying part, they understand helicopters, but the whole medevac mission is new. So I was there to teach at the pre-command course, and I was also the deputy director of the medevac proponency, who does doctrine and tactics for medevac missions. Mm-hmm. So, for example, these battalion brigade commanders would come in, and we would talk to them about, a lot of times they may think you pick the wounded up, you carry them to a battalion aid station. No, you don't, because there's only like a PA there and a few medics. We have Army hospitals on the battlefield, and so these guys have got to know a patient's hurt. Which hospital do I take them to? And the medic's going to make an assessment that, hey, maybe this guy needs a thoracic surgeon, or maybe we need a neurosurgeon. We're going to make that decision real far forward when we pick the patient up. So it's synchronizing and knowing what's out on the battlefield and getting the patient to the right doctor. And in modern times, we've become more joint. A lot of times the nearest doctor might be a Navy physician on a Navy ship offshore. Right. The Air Force has a thing called E-meds that they have at certain airfields. So we might go into combat, and like the Rangers might take an airfield, the Air Force might go in with C-130s and set up an E-meds. The Navy could be offshore with, let's say, cardiac surgeons on a certain ship. So it's knowing where to take the patient, and it's knowing how to do the right thing for the patient, and also to structure the medical community, get the right surgeon to the right place.
Did your command spend any time in Iraq?
Yes, I'm at Fort Rucker, the medevac proponency, and when the invasion of Iraq happened, this is in 2003, I got called, and they're like, hey, sending you overseas within a few days. And okay, that's kind of a strange phone call. And they said, when can you leave? And I said, I guess tomorrow. So they said, okay, go to Barksdale, Louisiana. Barksdale, Louisiana? I don't know, it's an Air Force base. So I get my stuff, and I'm driving to Barksdale, Louisiana. And I get there, and they tell me, you're our ground liaison officer, and we're going to a little island called Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is an island in the Indian Ocean. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do there? And they said, well, you're going to be our liaison officer, and your job is to talk to the Marines and talk to the Army guys. This is before the invasion of Iraq. When the invasion happened, your job is to coordinate with these guys on the ground and help us position our aircraft in the right battle space to be able to support Army and Marine guys. I'm with an Air Force Intel guys. I've got like a phone that's classified that I could talk to Army guys on the ground and Marines and just say, hey, I'm on this island. I got all these B-52s. If you got any missions, let me know. And we'll plan these missions. Now the Air Force planned some other missions too, but we were just kind of shortchanging it and saying, hey, we're here with these aircraft. Anyway, my main job was I'm in a mission planning cell, and we're planning these missions. I would brief the air crews. Now what's happened, Ed, is the B-52 has really changed. In Vietnam they used it in arc-like missions, dropping dumb bombs. But it's designed to be a strategic nuclear bomber. Well, now we've got JDAM technology. And what that is it takes GPS technology. There's two things that go on the bomb, one, a secret head on the nose and then a fin that straps on this bomb.
Precision bombing.
Yes, absolutely. Real precision bombing, like hit exactly where you want to hit with one bomb. So the guys on the ground would call a B-52 with a target. The crew would load up the coordinates, and they're really careful. They would load the coordinates and then bring it up again and read it back to the crew. Everyone wrote it down. You know, 2 pilots, 2 navigators, electronic warfare officer. They all wrote this coordinate down because they really were concerned that maybe they, drop the wrong bomb or do something different. Anyway, just amazing. The B-52s carried 26 2,000-pound JDAMs and I think 24 dumb bombs in the bomb bay.
So while you were on Diego Garcia, did you have an opportunity to fly in the B-52s?
Well, my main job was to be in mission planning, but yes, I got the opportunity to fly 2 missions. We pulled a lot of troops out of Afghanistan, so what we were doing every night, we sent a B-52 over Afghanistan to orbit, and we're talking to Army guys on the ground, some of these little remote outposts. Sometimes it's special forces teams, or sometimes it's just little remote outposts, and we're talking to them on the radio so that all night long we're there, and if they get attacked or they get encountered, we can support them. Maybe they're outside of artillery range, or maybe they're outside of Army attack helicopter range. And also, with the invasion of Iraq, we did the same thing. We would fly over Iraq and we would orbit, trying to support the guys on the ground. We had one particular interesting mission. The Marines called and said they would encounter a lot of Iraqi armor, and they were going to go around it. The Marine Corps doesn't have as much anti-armor capability as most Army divisions. So we planned a mission. The navigators came in and we looked at satellite imagery and we said, these Iraqi tanks, they're not moving, but we want to bomb in here, and the Marines are kind of going to go around them. So I tell you, the Air Force guys are just amazing. They're concerned for safety of the guys on the ground, and they're concerned for using their airplane to support the American troops. It's absolutely amazing how professional these guys are and what a good job they did in planning these missions.
Had you ever experienced any trouble on the B-52 in either of these flights?
Well, I wouldn't say I had any trouble, but the first one we took off, and because we're so heavily loaded with bombs, they're light on fuel. So we take off from Diego Garcia, it's at night, and we get up and we're supposed to meet the tanker. I guess they're at 30,000 feet or something. But about the time the tanker's supposed to show up, it's at night, we're in a thunderstorm. Now my job, I just sat in the jump seat with this parachute on. And we finally see the tanker in this night in the thunderstorm and all the turbulence. And we get behind the tanker, and the guy's trying to put the boom in right by my head, and it's going whack, and it misses, and it's going whack, and it misses. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so tense. Because I'm thinking, I said to the pilot, we don't have a lot of fuel to mess around, do we? And he goes, no, we've got to hit the tanker, because we can't get back to Diego. There's no place to go but the Indian Ocean. We've got a tank. So about the third time it didn't work, and then the pilot said, well, let me try. So he took the controls from the co-pilot, and he got up there really good, and I could see the thing go in, the boom probe going in. Yep. And I saw all these fuel gauges moving, and I'm like, I could breathe again. But they act like it was no big deal. It was a little tense for me.
If you've never been in a thunderstorm at 30,000 feet in turbulence, you don't understand.
Well, I went down and asked the navigators, are they messing with me? And they go, no, no one's messing with you. We didn't know there was going to be a thunderstorm here. We thought it was going to be a good weather mission.
After Diego Garcia?
I stayed with the Air Force for another year at Barksdale, kind of going over the lessons learned. And actually, we had a bunch of new guys came in. And so we're teaching them about supporting the Army on the ground and precision munitions. There was a lot of lessons learned from this, using JDAM. One of our B-52s, actually a couple of B-52s, had a targeting pod. So what that is, it lets the navigators look down at the ground and find the friendlies or even see the enemy around them using this image on the targeting pod. And they can also lock in a coordinate. So we're really thinking about how to use that in the next war. Tremendous experience. I got to teach at the Air Force has a thing called their weapons school, which is like their PhD for navigators and pilots. They asked me to come in and teach Army tactics. It was a real honor to be able to do that. I mean, I can't say enough about how supportive the Air Force is in their mission to support the guys on the ground.
By this time, your current rank would be?
Well, I'm a pretty senior lieutenant colonel. I'm thinking about retiring now. And so the Air Force, we have evaluations. I guess you have the same in the Navy, same thing.
Oh, yes.
So the Air Force says, well, to write up this evaluation, and your Air Force chain of command, my group commander and the wing commander is going to sign it. So group commander signs it. I go see the wing commander, and a friend of mine who I'd been on Diego with, we were in a mission planning cell together as a major. He's the wing commander's XO. He goes, hey, this is really good. bring this back, change a few things and bring it back Thursday. I'm like, well, today's Tuesday. Just go ahead and get the wing commander to sign it. He goes, no, he wants you to put down all the stuff you really did. So put down all these things you really did, come back Thursday. Kind of a strange request. Okay. So I come back Thursday and he's grinning like a possum, this major. He gets my evaluation signed, then he comes back and I'm like, what's so funny? He said, well, here you go. And I guess the wing commander got promoted to general on Wednesday. So he gave me this report, but it's signed by a general. But right. I'm thinking, well, okay, whatever. So I send that in, and because of the Air Force, I get promoted. So so I thought I was going to get out, but now I'm like, well, I'm going to stay another 2 years because I'm getting promoted, and I have to stay 2 years after you get promoted to get the retirement.
You were promoted twice to colonel. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, at this point, I'm the G3, the Operations Officer of Medical Readiness Training Command. So this is where we are evaluating Army hospitals that are going overseas. But my dad's in a veterans home, and so I wanted to go see him. It's in Western Tennessee. And I had called to coordinate stopping by to visit. My Uncle Bill, who was also an Army veteran, was going to meet us there. And my Uncle Bill says, well, you just got promoted to colonel, right? And I said, well, yes. And he goes, it's a shame you didn't do this, didn't let your dad know. He'd really get a kick out of promoting you. I'm like, well, it's too late. Last month I put the Eagles on, so it's a little bit late. And my Uncle Bill said, no, what I'm thinking is just bring some lieutenant colonel rank and we'll let your dad promote you. It'll mean a lot to him. And he's not going to know the difference. I'm like, Uncle Bill, I don't have any lieutenant colonel rank. And he said, is there an Army BX where you're at? And I said, yes. And he goes, well, then go by and buy some. So, of course, it was a great idea. So I go by and my dad promotes me to colonel, and I think he was really proud. It was a really proud moment.
So there's another story there that the press showed up.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a good point, Ed. I forgot about that. So when I called to coordinate stopping by to see my dad at the veterans home, he had a counselor because he had Alzheimer's at this point in time. And his counselor gets on the phone and she says, well, Colonel Thornton, we're so happy that you're going to be coming in. We just want you to know all the media is going to be here. I'm like, well, why would they do that? And she's like, well, it's not every day we get someone that's a Medal of Honor winner. And I said, I didn't win the Medal of Honor. What are you talking about? And she said, oh, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Like, what do you mean? She said, well, I Googled you, and it came up Mike Thornton, Medal of Honor winner. And so I asked your dad, does your son have the Medal of Honor? And he said, yes, you do. And I said, but Dad's got Alzheimer's. And, he's just not mentally. And so his counselor said, this is totally my fault. I'm so sorry. But I said, now, ma'am, I got to know. If the media is going to be there, I'm not coming because I'm not that Mike Thornton. I'm a different Mike Thornton. I'm from the Army. And she said, yes, I'll call him back and apologize, and we'll be glad to see you. And my dad was so proud. It really was a happy moment for him.
Yeah. You spent 37 years in the military. Would you talk a little bit about the support of your family that was behind you during this period of time?
Well, Ed, as you know, military wives are just amazing, and it takes a family to support our soldiers and our servicemen. I can remember as a second lieutenant studying at the Armor Basic Course, and my wife Debbie was watching our daughter, letting me study and being so supportive. When really I'd been gone all day, she wanted to get in the car and just go out to eat and go do something. Overseas, when I first showed up in Germany as a second lieutenant, the first thing they had me do, because I was an armor officer, our tanks were out in the field, so I had to go out to be a safety officer with tanks for 30 days. Now there's no cell phone. Debbie can't drive yet because we just showed up in Germany. She doesn't know how to get to the BX, and we got a little girl. So, in a new apartment that we just moved into, but I don't have TV hooked up. I don't have anything. So it's times like that where, Army spouses, military spouses, it's just really tough what they have to go through. But, she never complained. The schools I was trying to do good at, she helped me study. It was really a team effort. And it's just kind of amazing that not all spouses can do this, but most military spouses that.
Mike, you're now retired. How did you end up in Tellico Village?
My wife has family in Gatlinburg, Sevierville area, and we originally were going to move near them. And we saw Tellico Village, came over, and just fell in love with the community. I mean, what's not to love, right? There's so much stuff to do here. It's a great place to live.
So have you had any interesting hobbies since you've retired?
Well, a couple of things. When I first retired, I was really interested in the medical mission, so I went to paramedic school. Now I'm in the Civil Air Patrol. I fly cadets out at Knoxville and also up at Morristown Airport. I'm in the Experimental Aircraft Association up there. I teach World War II history at some of the local colleges. I'm going to Fort Benning next week to talk about World War II history. And we've also got something coming here to the village. We've got on TellicoVillageLearn.org. There are 4 different classes coming up about World War II history, and I'm really excited. That's my real passion. I'm really excited about being able to talk to people about that.
The greatest generation.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Mike, I want to thank you for joining us on The Veteran Next Door.
All right, thank you, Ed. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Veteran Next Door.